Welcome back, AP. Good to see you guys again. I know that we had a great class today. I am so impressed with y'all's ability to engage with material. Very, very excited. We'll review the last little chunk of it tomorrow, and then we got to get into this stuff a little bit, all right? But what we're getting into now is we're talking about like Renaissance humanism, right? So we talked mainly about, in the first couple flips, like the Renaissance economy and how, as the economy began to grow, that left the door open for more intellectual activity. There are some historians that actually believe that the Renaissance is not actually about art and literature and the development of brain power and humanism, that is actually much more about a revitalization of the economy and the birth of legitimate capitalism. Really cool guy to go watch a video about actually is there's a Crash Course World History video about the Renaissance. John Green does it, the guy who wrote like I think it's Chasing Alaska, right? Fault in Our Stars guy, that guy. Yeah, it does a really good video about it. So if you get bored, you can just go watch it. But anyway, let's talk about Renaissance humanism a little bit, all right? So first and foremost, everybody knows that Renaissance in French means rebirth, right? Everybody knows that. You learned that in Mr. Buchanan's class probably. But really quickly, what was being reborn in this rebirthing process, right? What is being reborn? Well, not me and my wife, but this is how my wife feels whenever I talk about this stuff whenever we're on vacation together. But it's ancient Greek and Roman culture. She, absolutely, her on a trip with me to Europe is just her listening to me talk about history stuff for about 3 to 4 days. So at this point, she was a little tired of it. But here we are standing in the Roman Forum, and we're actually, I was telling her about the reason why it looks the way that it does. And I don't know why it's going upside down. Hold on. Also, you can now see very, very clearly how I don't know what to do with my face whenever I take pictures. But as you can see in the background, the Forum does not look anything of what it did in its glorious days, right? This is Palatine Hill up here. This is the Temple of Zeus. Not Temple of Jupiter, technically. Or what was remained of it. The thing about it is like that's a really good picture, an example of the Middle Ages view of antiquity. So after the fall of the Roman Empire and getting into the Middle Ages and the spread of Christianity, a lot of the Middle Age, I guess you would call them intellectuals, viewed antiquity or the Roman era as something that just was fine to strip away, all right? And good, inklings of this is this is what the Forum looked like. It was flooded. There were cows and cattle grazing throughout it. The preservation of these ancient ruins was not on the forefront of anyone's mind. And then going forward, this is a really cool one. These are stone thieves, right? A lot of the reason why the Colosseum looks the way that it does, and it's got holes all over it if you ever get a chance to go, it's due to the fact that stone thieves used to come during the night, during the Middle Ages, and steal the iron rods out of the structural pieces of the Colosseum. They would also strip a lot of the limestone off of it and sell it to the Christians so they could build temples out of it. So repurposing a lot of this stuff was a really, really, really good, important thing to remember. And then, again, a lot of this antiquated, what they believed was antiquated, but the antiquity relics were just rotting into disrepair. They just didn't care about them. Their focus was Christianity, right? Because the thing about it is the core learning values of the Middle Ages were not understanding the past. It was Christian values, church basis, rise of the monasticism in the university system. The only people that received a very, very, very in-depth education was if you were going on to become a monk or a priest. We'll talk about some of these guys who actually begin to question the church a little bit. When we get into the Reformation, we'll talk about Jan Hus, John Wycliffe, and Zwingli, and Erasmus. So a lot of different figures that began to pop up due to their educational values, and they were seeing the corruption within the church, right? So, but the university system was rising up, which ironically enough, for those of you who don't know, the university system was actually a Muslim idea because they were having a huge golden age era during the European Middle Ages, right? So, but following the fall of Rome, most texts of ancient wisdom are lost. By the way, don't write these things word for word. Just be like, fall of Rome after loss of much of the intelligence or whatever. It was lost to people like the Muslims when they actually began to invade. When the Ostrogoths invaded, a lot of these relics were destroyed, and a lot of these accounts were destroyed. Luckily, a bunch of them, the Library of Constantine was filled with ancient manuscripts from the western half of Rome because they actually moved what was considered the capital of the Roman Empire to Byzantium, Constantinople, a lot of the, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of the intelligence of the Roman era was held onto that way. The funny part about it is because the Muslims came in, the Ottoman Turks, when they actually took over the Byzantine in the 1450s, they had already taken a lot of this learning and translated it into Arabic, which is actually really neat. They had a golden age off of Western intelligence in a lot of ways. The works of Aristotle actually spent more time in Arabic than they ever did in common European vernacular languages. So translations of these works, though, are eventually going to end up back in the Christian hands and Europeans around sometime in the 12th century. A lot of major places that this was happening in like the south of Spain, outside the Andalus, in Anatolia. Anatolia is another big region where they actually began to meet up and exchange these ideas. A lot of that has to do with the Jewish community. The Jewish community was kind of intermediary between the Muslim and the Christian communities. So when they began to gain access to a lot of this intelligent currency, I guess you could say, or intelligent cargo, they actually began to share it with the Christians, leading to the Vatican to send convoys of priests and educated monks to actually go and recapture a lot of that ancient wisdom. One of your biggest guys that's responsible for the rise of the Renaissance is St. Thomas Aquinas, right? St. Thomas Aquinas, the patron saint of education and the rediscovery of intelligence, right? So he's one of the, and if you read Sophie's World, he talked about him. So that's going to lead later on in the 1300s, not the 1450s, but the 1300s, to the rise of humanism, right? So let's talk about what humanism is real quick. So humanism, or humanists, are people who advocate for the study of secularism and an emphasis on individuality. Now, what I mean by secularism is like, let's reach back into not middle school, but let's reach back into the Middle Ages unit from your freshman year. Secular means earthly objects, like this desk, this computer, secular, right? The study of why white light is the combination of all colors of light of the spectrum. Why do we see color, right? Like Isaac Newton sticking metal rods inside of his eye to try and understand these things. He's a secularist in a lot of ways, even though ironically enough, he got like really scared that he was like outlying God with science. But anyway, so humanism is an emphasis on all these new things. And this is a Vitruvian man, but he's fat and it's hilarious. So humanism is the study designed mostly by Northern Italians that emphasizes the study of ancient culture to understand human nature and our true potential. What can we do? What can we accomplish? What can we learn? Instead of just saying God intends these things, what do we know? What can we learn? In the abyss of non-knowing, what can we find? Right? So that is a humanist perspective, okay? Now, individualism, of course, is a major component of humanism. That's the belief that singular humans are capable of great, great accomplishments. Leonardo da Vinci, major humanist, right? Major individualist, even though he was also a devout Christian as well, even though he was very, very against the structure of the Catholic Church. What a lot of, really, really quickly, before you write Plato obsession down, there are possibly three ancient figures that you could say from the age of antiquity that give us these ideas of humanisms, and they were kind of the foundation of these early humanist thoughts, okay? One of them is Plato. All right. This, ironically enough, is not Plato. That's Socrates. That's me standing next to a bust of Socrates, but it's the closest thing I could find to Plato. Now, many Renaissance humanists are going to link their ideas to that of Plato and Aristotle. Aristotle, in his grasp of the minutia of every little thing in its place. This animal has hair and it doesn't lay eggs, so it goes into this group. The ideas of empiricism. That is like draw an arrow real quick from Aristotle to empiricists. The idea of experience-based learning. And then Plato and his ideas of rationalism, just using human thought and logic to try and understand the scope of what we do and do not know, right? So a lot of the early ideas of Plato and Aristotle are going to be retranslated, and they're the basis of humanist thought. The other big humanist hero is the first and ultimate cynic, all right? You know of him as Cicero, right? Lives during the time of Caesar. Rebels against everything. Does not take anything at face value. He's a cynic, right? So he actually, during the era of Caesar, supported a return away from a dictatorship towards the republic again, right? So a lot of the early humanist thinkers really, really were big fans of Cicero because he literally advocates for the challenging of authority and the established view of intelligence, right? So if you have like one of my favorite quotes by Cicero, I might get this tattooed like on my face, because it's one of my favorite things. If you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need, all right? And I have plants and books on my area behind my desk, if you want to know where that idea came from. It's a Cicero idea, right? So really cool thing too, Brutus actually called out his name when he stabbed Caesar. He just like said Cicero and then stabbed Caesar because he also advocated for a return to the Republic. Now, this is one of the last things that you're going to be writing down. That's the last thing that you're going to be writing down. It's the ideas of virtue. Coming from these ancient humanists, it's the quality of being able to shape the world according to one's will. So as you can tell, that is the inspiration of the idea of wonderment behind Renaissance art. So what we went over today is just the ancient humanists, kind of the pre-humanist thinkers, and where the Renaissance humanist ideas came from. This idea of virtue, and what we're going to get into tomorrow is the earliest humanists like Boccaccio and Dante Alighieri and Petrarch, right? We're going to talk about those guys. I'm going to be giving you your study guide cover sheet tomorrow as well. So I look forward to seeing you guys then, though. Have a great evening.